Imagine a world that's 11 feet by 11 feet, a sink, a bed, a television with a handful of channels that flicker like ghosts. Now, imagine a 5-year-old boy who believes with his whole heart that this room is the entire universe, that nothing exists beyond those walls, because his mother told him so. And his mother would never lie. By the end of this video, you'll understand why the most devastating moment of this story isn't the escape. It's what happens after, when freedom turns out to be its own kind of prison. Let's step inside. His name is Jack. Today is his 5th birthday, and he wakes up the way he always does, greeting the sink, greeting the plant, greeting the wardrobe like old friends, because in a world this small, everything gets a name. Everything gets a soul. His mother calls herself Ma, and to him, she is not a person with a past. She is the entire architecture of his existence. What you don't know yet, what Jack doesn't know, is that this room is not a room at all. It's a soundproofed shed in a stranger's backyard, and Ma has been trapped here for 7 years, since she was 19 years old. Here's what makes this opening so quietly devastating. The film never rushes to explain the horror. Instead, it lets you see everything through Jack's eyes first. Golden, curious, almost cozy. That's a deliberate choice, because before you can understand Ma's trauma, you have to understand the beautiful lie she built to protect her son from it. She turned captivity into a kingdom. But how long can a lie that big hold together? And what happens to a mother's mind when she has to perform hope every single day for a child who has never known anything else? Every night, the same quiet terror. Ma tucks Jack into the wardrobe, closes the door, and tells him to sleep no matter what he hears. And then, footsteps. A man arrives. The film never shows his face clearly, not for a long time, and that's intentional. He's not a character to us. He's a threat, a shadow, a set of sounds a little boy has learned to associate with his mother going quiet and still. This is the man who kidnapped Ma 7 years ago. This is Jack's father, though Jack doesn't know it, and honestly, does he need to? Watch how the camera stays low at Jack's height, almost the entire film. You're not just watching this story, you're trapped inside it the same way he is. That's not an accident. That's a director forcing empathy on you through pure perspective, and it raises a question that will haunt the rest of the story. How do you protect a child from a truth that's living in the same room as him? Then, something in Ma cracks, quietly but permanently. A request for medicine is denied. A small act of cruelty reminds her once again that she and her son exist entirely at another person's mercy. And that night, for the first time, she looks at Jack, really looks at him, and makes a decision that will define everything that follows. She's going to tell him the truth, not some of it. All of it. That there is a sky, that there are oceans and roads and other people, thousands and thousands of other people, and that the walls he's grown up loving are not the world, they're a cage. Picture being 5 years old and having your entire universe dismantled in a single afternoon. Jack doesn't take it well. He calls her a liar. He curls into himself and refuses to believe her because why would he? His mother built this world with her own hands, brick by brick, story by story. And now she's telling him it was never real. This is one of the most quietly heartbreaking ideas in the whole film. Sometimes the truth doesn't feel like liberation. Sometimes it feels like a second betrayal. So how do you convince a child to trust a truth that terrifies him more than the lie ever did? Desperation breeds genius. Ma comes up with a plan so fragile it's almost unbearable to watch unfold. Fake a fever, ask for a doctor, and if that fails, wrap Jack in a rug, tell him to pretend to be dead, and pray that the man carrying him out doesn't look too closely. It's a plan built entirely on a 5-year-old's ability to lie convincingly and stay perfectly still while terrified. Think about that for a second. A mother is placing her son's survival and her own into the hands of a child who, until 3 days ago, didn't even know lying was possible in a world outside these walls. The tension in this sequence isn't loud, it's suffocating. Every creak of the floor, every pause before footsteps, every second Jack spends motionless under that rug feels like it stretches into forever. And you have to ask yourself, would you trust a plan this thin if it was the only door left open to you? Because Ma doesn't have the luxury of a better one. He's in the truck bed now, wrapped tight, heart pounding against fabric that smells like nothing he's ever smelled before. And somewhere between the shed and the road, something extraordinary happens. Jack has to become brave in a way no child should ever have to be. He wriggles free. He jumps. He runs alone into a world he was told didn't exist until 4 days ago, chased by a dog, terrified out of his mind, and somehow, flags down a stranger. This sequence works because it strips away every ounce of sentimentality. There's no swelling music telling you it's going to be okay, just raw, chaotic, handheld panic, because that's what freedom actually feels like the first time you touch it. Total sensory overload. And in that moment, you realize the getting out was never actually the hardest part of this story. It's what comes next that's going to test them both. Within minutes, police arrive at the shed. Ma is found alive, and the reunion between mother and son happens off-screen almost entirely, a choice that speaks volumes. This story was never interested in giving you a triumphant cinematic rescue moment to cheer for, because real trauma doesn't resolve the second the danger ends. It just changes shape. And here's where the film does something most survival stories never bother to do. It keeps going. Most movies would roll credits right here on the happy ending. This one is just getting started, because getting out of the room was never the whole story. It was only ever the first half. Sunlight, space, ceilings that go up and up with no end in sight. For 7 years, Ma dreamed of this moment. For Jack, it's terrifying. Too bright, too loud, too big. Too many strangers with too many faces. He shields his eyes in a hospital hallway like the sky itself is attacking him, and honestly, in a way, it is. His entire nervous system was built for 11 feet by 11 feet, and now it's being asked to process the entire planet in a single afternoon. There's something quietly profound here. We assume freedom is always a gift, but for a child who's never needed it, has never even conceived of it, freedom can feel a lot like drowning. And that reframes everything you thought you knew about what this family actually needs to heal, because the finish line everyone's been running toward for 7 years, it turns out to just be the starting line of something even harder. Ma returns to her childhood home, but home isn't what it used to be either. Her parents have separated. Her mother has a new partner, gentle and well-meaning, whom Jack instinctively warms to in a way that quietly wounds Ma more than she'll admit out loud. And outside the front door, cameras wait. Reporters wait. A television interviewer eventually asks Ma questions dripping with a specific ugly implication. Questions about whether she should have tried harder to give Jack away, to protect him by handing him over to his captor's world instead of keeping him in that room with her. Watch Ma's face in that interview. It's not sadness. It's fury. Barely contained, the fury of a woman who survived the unsurvivable and is now being asked to justify her survival to people who will never understand it. This is where the story quietly shifts its real question. It stops asking, will they escape, and starts asking something much harder. Once you're free, who gets to decide whether you did your suffering the right way? And then, the moment the film has been quietly building toward the entire time. Alone in the bathroom, overwhelmed by grief for the years she lost, the person she used to be, and a world that keeps asking her to be grateful instead of letting her grieve. Ma takes a bottle of pills. She survives. But something in the story shifts permanently here, because up until now, Ma has been the unbreakable one, the planner, the protector, the one who stayed calm so Jack didn't have to be scared. This is the moment that reveals the film's real thesis. Survival and healing are not the same thing. You can get a person out of a room, but you cannot simply get the room out of a person, not with time, not with love, not even with freedom itself. And now, for the first time in the whole story, it's Jack who has to be strong for her. A 5-year-old holding space for his mother's pain. How does a child even begin to carry that? While Ma is hospitalized, Jack stays with his grandmother, and something remarkable happens. The boy who once believed the world was 11 feet wide starts, slowly, cautiously, to grow into it. He lets a family dog get close. He plays with another child in the yard. He even, in one small, unbearably tender scene, decides to cut off the long hair he's kept his entire life. Not because anyone told him to, but because he's read that hair holds your strength, and he wants to send his strength to his mother the way a superhero would. It's such a small gesture, and it might be the most powerful moment in the entire film, because it tells you Jack was never just a victim of what happened to him. He has his own inner world, his own logic, his own capacity for sacrifice and love that rivals any adult's. So when Ma comes home, changed and fragile, who do you think ends up leading whom back toward the light? Before the story lets them go, it does something almost nobody expects. Ma and Jack ask to go back. Back to the shed. Back to the 11 feet by 11 feet that held 7 years of Ma's life and all 5 of Jack's. And when they step inside, it's smaller than either of them remembered. The ceiling lower, the space tighter, almost laughably small compared to the terrifying, beautiful world outside it. Jack walks through it like he's saying goodbye to an old friend who was never really a friend at all. He greets the objects one last time, the way he did on the very first morning of this story, and then, gently, without any big speech or dramatic declaration, he's ready to close the door. Not because the pain is over, it never fully will be, but because he's finally allowed to let it become the past instead of the only world he's ever known. And maybe that's the whole point this story has been making all along, that closure isn't about forgetting where you came from. It's about finally being able to walk out the door and not look back. What stays with you, long after the credits, isn't the horror of the room itself. It's the quiet, staggering resilience of a mother who turned a nightmare into a nursery rhyme just to keep her son's soul intact, and the resilience of a son who, without even realizing it, ended up saving her right back. This isn't really a story about captivity. It's a story about what love is willing to build out of almost nothing and what it costs to carry someone else's survival on your back for 7 years without ever letting them see you buckle. And maybe that's the question worth sitting with. We tend to think the hardest part of surviving something terrible is getting out. But this story argues the opposite, that getting out is just the moment the real work begins. So I'll leave you with this. If freedom itself can feel this disorienting, this frightening, this hard won, what does that tell us about the quiet battles the people around us might still be fighting long after their own room is behind them? If this recap moved you the way this story moved me, let me know down in the comments. I'd genuinely love to hear what part hit you hardest. And if you want more deep dive recaps like this one, make sure you're subscribed because there's a lot more where this came from.